Today, we're talking about developing a sustainable rural social enterprise. Social enterprises are very widespread across both the UK and the rest of the world, and they require a little bit of careful thought in the way they're set up and also in the way that you manage these businesses. So therefore, we're going to explore some of the issues that are around social enterprises and especially around rural ones. So my name is David Boswood. I'm the head of the School of Business and Entrepreneurship at the Royal Agricultural University, and I've been a technology entrepreneur, an educator and a researcher for many, many years. But I've also worked for a number of charities and trusts over the years, and therefore have built up quite a number of years of knowledge around social enterprises and how they should work. So the first question is, what is a social enterprise? Most people have something in their head about what it is, but the real definition that we're going to use today is based from the Treasury, the Majesty's Treasury, and that's predominantly because they set the standards, and if you don't fit being a social enterprise, you can't claim the tax benefits. That's always a good way to start. Their definition is about the primary aim of the venture of the company should be that it has some form of social impact. And that social impact needs to be both measured and reported upon if you are a social enterprise. So that's the first thing. That's the primary aim of the venture, is to have some form of social enterprise, social impact. The second point is quite interesting as an entrepreneurship lecturer, is that there needs to be some form of entrepreneurial innovative way in which you are delivering those services. Now, typically as a social enterprise, you will be gaining money in a particular business model, and you will be using that money for some form of social good or social impact. And the more entrepreneurial you are and the more innovative you are in getting that money, the higher the social impact that you can create. And therefore, you are looking to create a surplus of money within the business, and that surplus of money can then be used on social activities. We don't use the word profit typically because we have a surplus of money, and the more money we have, we will tend to spend on social good. So social enterprises look to create surpluses of which that money can then be spent either in that financial year or in other financial years. Social enterprises also tend to have stakeholders and customers rather than shareholders and customers. So people will have a stake in a social enterprise, but not necessarily a share. So social enterprises might be set up. Let's just assume you're setting up a social enterprise for offering free bikes or bicycle repairs in a town, and therefore the people who are involved in creating and developing the service, i.e. the workers and the customers, would be the ones that would be particularly involved and want to be involved with it. And it's those stakeholders who really are the key people that have a say in a social enterprise. So it's a little bit different in the way it's set up, and we use slightly different terminology as well. But aren't all businesses social? Aren't all businesses have some form of social aspect to them? Well, they should do. And there's something called a cross-sector theory. And when you're starting a social enterprise, it's very important to try and figure out where you fit in this table, this graph, because it shows you the type of business models you should be employing. So if I take you around the circles, the top right circle is the private sector. The private sector is where people have shares in business and make money through dividends and spend that dividends on whatever they want. The public sector is where things are owned by the government, and if there is a profit, that money will go back to the government. And the third sector is the charity sector, where we have these stakeholders who have a stake in a business, and the profits or surpluses are then circulated around for social good. But let me just um, the diagram has a very difference of shades in the middle, and if we look at first A, the non-profit, so you can have you can be a third sector charity and also be partly owned by the public sector, and therefore you have a business entity which is a not-for-profit, is a non-profit organization. You could also have a cross between a private sector and a public sector business, and this is what we call um, community service, in the sense that people are giving money back into the public. So if you are a bank, for instance, since the financial crash, you will be told how much percentage of your profits should be given back to public good. There's also C, which is more than profit. So if you think of Oxfam, Oxfam is an organisation that has shops on the high street, and those shops are very, very profitable. They get volunteers to work in them. They get people to donate clothes and items to the shop. The shop is rent-free, and therefore, as an Oxfam, these shops are very, very, very profitable. And therefore, they're more than profit. They are creating a massive surplus for the third sector, but they're doing it in a very private sector way. So that's the three sectors there, A, B, and C. But actually, the sweet spot for a social enterprise is really the multi-stakeholder. Whereas as an organization, you have a business model that is a little bit public sector. You have a business model that also has engagement with the private sector, and you have a business model that's also third sector. And that's how you can become a really sustainable social enterprise, by having this, what we call cross-sector, multi-stakeholder business model. And that's really one of the core things to learn about today, is that this middle part here is really where we try and aim for when we're starting a social enterprise. Just an example here, just to show you different businesses, especially within the sort of agri-food industry. So Warwickshire County Council there, they have a series of farms which they rent out to people at a very low cost to get people started in farming. The National Trust also rents out farms and also sells the food that's made in those farms in their shops. Same with the co-op. The co-op also owns a series of farms which it sells and gives money back to the local community. Whereas when you look at places like Tesco and Asda and Morrison's lets so, of course, because they do also have their own farms and they also support local farmers. You can see that we have a plethora of different businesses with different types of business models. But Waitrose is the one that really sticks in the middle, because it actually does have a very stakeholder driven, because its employees are its stakeholders driven business model, and is looking after both the three different sectors, the public sector, the private sector, and the third sector. With any business, when you start a business or running a business, it's really important that you understand the metrics that you have to present. And of course, when you're a social enterprise, this can be a little bit more, because as a social enterprise, you should have some form of social aim or social good that you can provide. And if you're doing that, you need to show it and report on that to both HMRC, Companies House, or the Charity Commission. So here's three which I think are important if you are going to start a social enterprise and what you need to report. So first one, strategic intention. Within your company structure, you should outline what you intend to do within your social purpose. And also the second one there is governance. With a normal company, you'll have directors, but within a social enterprise, you'll have stakeholders. How are you going to get those stakeholders to be involved with the governance of the business? How do you know you've got the right stakeholders at the table? Because you know what it's like when you ask people, is there anybody interested in telling us what they think? You're always going to get the people that might not necessarily give you a rounded view. So corporate governance in social enterprise is a real problem. And I think the co-op bank is a good example of how some corporate governance has actually not really worked, and the bank has not suffered recently. Second there is financial. All businesses in the UK have to report their financial turnover and their profitability. And of course, as a social enterprise, and not necessarily your core aim. Your core aim is that strategic intention to provide some social good. So reporting on your turnover has to be done. It's one of those things that's important. But the second item there, turnover dedicated to social impact, is really what you should be aiming for. So as a social enterprise, you will turn over so much money, and what percentage of that are you actually using? So you could, if you are like an Oxfam, they might be managing to provide maybe 60 or 70% of their turnover on social good or social impact. The smaller the charity and the less overheads they have, that might be 95%. And that's a key in showing, especially for your donors, what it is you're doing with the money. Because there's a lot of charities that have some extreme overheads and they never ever put the money to where it's really providing social impact. So that turnover dedicated to social impact is a very important metric. When we look at social impact, normally there we're looking at interventions, and that's the easiest way. So if you look at Oxfam, keep using this example. Oxfam will have so many interventions with children, with adults, in hospitals, and those interventions is what they're measuring and demonstrating as a charity as their real strategic intention. Of course, going and helping somebody is never going to allow you to generate more money. So a lot of the social impact is actually, and then the interventions, a lot of it's filmed, is photographed, is recorded, and the PR and the policy intervention that you go out with is how you generate the money. So if you can create a need and show that need, then you can influence policy, and policy will then follow through to provide more financial turnover. So the PR and the policy side of a social enterprise is very important because it can help you generate money. Okay, so those are three of the most important metrics which you need to try and keep focus of. And the way we typically talk about this is a triple bottom line. So it's the marriage of your social aims, your social ownership, and your enterprise. And the social ownership is key in making sure that the social enterprise is centered in the society that it's aiming to support. And that's why some of the larger charities, the international charities, lose their focus because they forget who their real customer is. And it's the same with any business. So the triple bottom line is what we look at when we're reporting our financial statements. And it's a balancing act, really. So what you're trying to do is not to create too much profit and not enough mission. And a lot of charities suffer with this because if you can imagine it, it's two wheels or two cups you need to keep balancing and keep full. If you make too much profit, then you're for profit. If you make too little profit, then you're bankrupt and you'll go into bankruptcy court. So you've got to try and balance these two things together. And sometimes when you've got a financial year, that can be quite difficult because one year you'll make a surplus, the next year you won't. And it's trying to even those things out because everything doesn't necessarily work in 1 year cycles. So that's one of the core problems of social enterprises, is that they suffer from either making too much or too little. And that's why a lot of them will go bankrupt, because if they're making too much money, then they don't have enough PR and policy to promote. If they're doing too much interventions, then they might not necessarily have enough money to do it, and so therefore go bankrupt. And it's this feast and famine that they go through. And it can be quite difficult to run a charity because in a normal business, you don't need to worry about that because you just need to make the profit. So brings me to capital. So when we look at a social enterprise, we talked about the money and the metrics, but also it's important to focus on what is the capital that you're really looking to look after. What is the value in that capital? So I tend to think about 8 forms of capital. So as a social enterprise, are you focused on the cultural capital? Are you helping to develop human capital? Certainly there'll be some financial capital. Are you helping develop people's intellectual or their knowledge? So a lot of education charities are key to looking at that knowledge capital. Are you helping people create material? So again, Oxfam has a lot of projects which help people create physical objects, and they sell those physical objects to other people, and that gets them trading between each other. Are we helping to create the natural capital? Are we looking after animals, plants, water or soil? Are we generating a society, connecting people with their values? Or is it spiritual? Of course, most religions in the UK are charities, so there's a large number of charities which are spiritual. So if you focus on the capitals that you're wanting to develop and the metrics that are behind those, then it becomes a lot easier to report and identify what you're supposed to be doing. So the capitals there are one of the most important things, because a lot of people that start charities are very passionate, but are not good at identifying what they are actually doing and why they're doing it. So my last slide here, what are the 5 ways that social enterprise can create a more sustainable future? So in a few words, first of all, is to develop a clear social mission and vision. So what is the social impact that you're going to have? What are the social interventions will you do for that social mission and vision? So that's the first thing. Develop a clear social mission and vision. Secondly, understand the best business model for your organization. And what you saw with the diagram with the 3 circles is that there might be a mix of different business models that support you. And some of those will maybe for profit, some of those may be more private sector or public sector or charity based. And understanding the balance between those different business models and how they cycle because there's, government funding comes in cycles. It normally comes in either 1 year or 3 year cycles. Um, businesses have cycles as an annual cycle. So we're entering at the moment the golden quarter. So as a charity, you can earn a lot of money in this quarter. So how do you set up this charity or social enterprise to use the best business models for your organization that helps you to be sustainable? Is number two. Number three, develop your capability to deliver. Now, running a charity is harder than running a for-profit business because you've got to have the social mission and also developing the financial resources to provide it. So that capability is a lot harder to develop, and therefore you need to focus on developing the capability yourself and also within your team. Number four, understand the metrics needed to demonstrate your impact, because if you're not going to demonstrate it, then nobody's going to give you any money. And that comes down to the, shaking your tin on the high street, and when somebody says, well, what do you do? All the way to providing policy briefings into the government. And that metric on how you prove what you do and how you do it is more important here. And number five, implement integrated bottom line reporting. So when you have your reporting, everything's integrated together. So you are proving all the different aspects that you bring in, the social good, the financial, all the different capitals, you're bringing it together and reporting on that in one integrated bottom line. And that then allows you to grow and move forward every single year, because you can prove, year one, year two, year three, year four, and you can prove what you've been doing. And therefore you're more likely to get more money and more likely to be sustainable as a social enterprise.